really? Okay. Okay. Not my decision. I just heard of it, that some presenters are very keen on presenting now, and we are going to have the coffee break half an hour later at 4 o'clock, and now we got the first social LCA session presenters done.
Okay. Okay, so we can start with the presentations of the next session. That is about the social LCA, right? So I kindly invite to the stage the speakers. Maybe since I see Despina, we can start with her, and then we move to Sarah. But Sarah, I cannot find Sarah actually. So I see. But they told me that it's better to start, so.
It will be Ioanna first, and then...
Yeah, okay, so let's start with Despina. That will talk about integrated social acceptance and trade-offs into safe and sustainable by design.
Oh.
So you prefer to... Doesn't work anymore. So we have a technical problem with the pointer, as usual. So we would like to stay the schedule, but maybe somebody can help us.
Okay, we can change slides from here if not.
No, il pointer prima fai
Non c'è più. Maybe somebody stole the USB stick. No. Okay, no, we found it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Forse semplicemente anch'io ho provato, ma forse no, non scarica la batteria. Questo prima era staccato. Ah, ok, adesso. Okay, so we are ready.
Oh, okay.
If you want, yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Ioanna Stathopoulou, and along with my colleague Despina Brasinika, we're more than excited to share with you our work on the integration of social sciences into the safe and sustainable by design framework, while giving you at the same time insights and example from the project that we are currently working on, BioSapphire, which has to do, actually it's examining novel bio-based flame retardants. So as you can see, the title of the presentation is Making Sustainability Social, Integrating Social Acceptance and Trade-offs into Safe and Sustainable by Design. In general, the presentation aims to propose a general framework of integrating a social dimension to safe and sustainable by design. And the way to do that is by embedding societal values, by assessing trade-offs and by foregrounding social acceptance early on the material innovation process. To be more specific, we aim to prove that sustainability is not only a technical challenge, but it's also a social one. And what we mean by social challenge is social is not just another word to describe sustainability, but it's about changing fundamentally how we approach sustainability in a way that it includes stakeholder values and societal practices too. So why do social dimensions matter in SSbD? Often, safe and sustainable by design approaches are focused only in two major axes. The first one is the safety in terms of toxicological profiles, and the second one is sustainability in terms of environmental performance and of life cycle assessments. However, we argue that this leaves out a third important dimension, the social one. Sometimes it's later on addressed, sometimes it's not addressed at all, but often it's undervalued. So social dimension refers to how people, and by people we mean the end users of a product, the workers, the companies, the policymakers, how all these people interact with and respond to new innovations, new materials, new products. So if a material is safe and sustainable, but it's not understood, it's not trusted, it's not compatible with the social systems that we are part of, it's never gonna reach widespread adoption. So as you can understand, social acceptance can be a gatekeeper for innovation. That's why social sciences, and especially fields like science and technology studies, sociology, and further innovation studies have emphasized the need for user-centered, so therefore society-centered design. This requires examining materials not only on how they function, but how they are perceived and how they are embedded in everyday practices. So in order to do that, we need to clarify two important key terms. The first one is social acceptance, and the second one is social impact. So let's begin with the social acceptance one. Social acceptance refers to how shareholders, again, companies, policymakers, end users, perceive and support or reject new technologies and new materials. So according to Wustenhagen and his article of 2007, social acceptance operates at three levels: market level, socio-political one, and the community one. And to give a better example, to better summarize the figure, a product may receive policy support, but it could fail at the market level if people feel that they did not have an active word in the decision-making process. Why? Because social acceptance has to do with people not passively accepting something, but with people who really want to make a change and to feel that they have a voice in decision-making. So what we need to understand from that is that social acceptance is a dynamic process. It could change. For example, a material that was not accepted in the beginning could eventually, if it's better understood, be accepted. The next term that we are going to see is the one of social impact. So social impact pertains to the effects, positive or negative, of an innovation at the well-being, the work, the safety, the equity, cultural norms, the access to resources, and the social fabric of communities. It's not about perceptions, but mostly about the real effect that a new product has. It should be highlighted that social impact is separate from sustainability, and it's actually one of its pillars. They're not separate, they are just complementing each other. So a technology that reduces emissions but worsens inequalities is not truly sustainable. We need to also emphasize that social impact is often qualitative and relational. It's about how people perceive a product, how they feel, how they react to innovation, and not just what shows up in some spreadsheets. Integrating this concept into safe and sustainable by design ensures that sustainable solutions are not only technically viable, but also socially viable. So what do we need to keep from all that? That social impact informs social acceptance. If people perceive that an innovation has unfair or negative effects, they are less likely to accept it, of course. So regardless whether that's technically sound. Now we're going to see one of these fields that offer a lot on the field of social acceptance. It's actually a combination of studies. It's called Science and Technology Studies, and it's an interdisciplinary field that examines how social, political, and cultural values affect scientific research and technological innovations. Science and technology studies emphasize that society and technology co-construct each other. And we can see a lot of STS insights into innovation processes, especially in areas like AI, nanotechnology, green chemistry, and sustainable design. Some scholars of this field argue that in order to be truly responsible, an innovation must be co-produced with society. And that includes deliberating and accepting into the decision-making all the stakeholders, recognizing the competing values, and opening a space for a dialogue. Now, we will have a look at the societal dimensions of sustainable materials and how we can pass from the impacts to acceptance. So far, we have discussed what social impact and social acceptance are, but how do these ideas apply specifically to materials, and especially sustainable materials? Here, we will outline the core of components of our approach. First, we will look at the social impacts. These include ripple effects, such as changes in the job routines, changes in safety in the line of work of the production workers that deal with material production, for example, or the shifts in consumer behavior, which is also part of the market dimension. For example, could a new, and that's an example from Biosophier, but Despina will mention in detail afterwards. For example, could a new biodegradable flame retardant lead to a more circular economy in furniture manufacturing, or would it create new costs or new safety complications? That's an answer that we cannot yet answer because we haven't taken into account how people perceive the material, whether they would be able to adopt it, how they're going to use it, and whether they advocate for or against it. Secondly, we will assess the social acceptance. So we can measure carbon emissions or life cycle energy use, but we cannot assess trust. We cannot assess social equity, and we cannot assess worker well-being. We cannot assess them yet, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, find a way to assess the social impact and the social acceptance. We're interested not in just opinions, but in the underlying rationales, like how all stakeholders, workers, policymakers, companies, end users, their underlying rationales, like their trust, their familiarity, the risk perception or values. And typically the most important dimensions are the qualitative ones, like do workers feel safe using this new material? Do consumers understand the benefits of a new material? These are just as real as any technical indicator. And now Despina is going to give more examples based on the project that we are currently participating.
So hello by my side as well. Okay. Okay, I would like to describe a little bit more how all this information, how the social science approach may be incorporated within a research project, and I will try to put the engineer perspective into this. I will use as an example BioSafari project that we are participating and we are responsible for integrating the social science approach within the Safe and Sustainable by Design framework. As my colleague Ioanna said, BioSafari is a project dealing with the introduction of new flame retardants, a new generation of flame retardants that will eventually replace the current toxic alternatives. They will be applied across 4 industrial sectors, namely railway, naval, home appliances, and furniture, and specifically wood furniture. But what makes BioSafari really different from other projects is the fact that apart from achieving technological innovation, another core goal is to engage the stakeholders from the early beginning, all the stakeholders from each sector, even from the design phase of the new products and the new materials, in order to ensure that the products that will be eventually developed will be socially accepted. By focusing more on the social science approach that we would like to introduce in BioSafari and adapt in relevant project like this, it is the fact that when we are dealing with a new project, trying to introduce new type of materials, we should raise several questions related to the toxicity of this new type of materials, their biodegradability. In cases like this one that we are dealing with flame retardants, we are also focusing on assessing the fire safety and also questions related to the final product, as for example, the affordability of the new material or the new product, the cost and their performance and the functionality that we would like to have. And typically, all of us will try to assess this question from a technical perspective. But this is where exactly social science penetrate and provide us a framework to also assess how real people, how real world may frame these questions and may provide their perspective. So one of the core goals is to ensure that all the technologies and the materials that are designed to be developed will follow what society actually needs and what society actually wants. And this means that we should try to understand what values people actually attach to the new type of material, what they expect from the new type of material and what consideration they may have and what concern. So by using social science, we will try to promote a more user-centered approach. We will try to shift from the perspective of what we can achieve and what we can do to what should we achieve and how we should make it responsibly. So in this process, apart from all the material developers, scientists, industrial partners, we are trying also to engage social scientists and social science experts, and of course the stakeholders. And it is important to mention that all these stakeholders should be engaged as early as possible, even from the design phase of the new material. And this is important because early engagement will ensure that any red flags will be identified as early as possible before it is too late. So we will have the time to adapt ourselves, to adapt our processes, and take into consideration their requirements. This is fully aligned with what BioSafari is targeting, where the goal is to ensure that the products that will be developed in these industrial sectors that I mentioned before, when they will penetrate the market, they will not be met with hesitation, but with support and understanding. And we will ensure that these products will be adopted by the relevant customers and the relevant consumers. So in this slide, you can see what are the main principles where we are trying to use the social science approach towards innovation. Typically, you all know, majority of us here, we are engineers, we are material scientists, we are chemical engineers. We deal with innovation from a totally technical perspective. We think that innovation is dealing with solving engineering problems, improving performance, improving functionality of the final materials. But social science reminds us that innovation is also a social process. And the core idea behind this is that the fact that a material cannot be automatically translated to innovative just because it performs well. In order to become innovative and characterized as innovative, it should be used, trusted, and valued by the people that it's meant to serve. So we should take into account that the innovation should be shaped by real user needs, their behavior, and their experiences. We should try to incorporate social science in order to identify how people perceive these new materials and what actually motivates them or discourages them to adopt this new type of material. We should also try to map all actor perspectives and identify their power symmetries. And with this, I mean that we should try to incorporate as many diverse voices as possible. You all know that not all voices are equal. There are voices that are more powerful, like, for example, in the manufacturing world, the large manufacturers, the regulators, and there are also people that are not so much heard because they are smaller, like small manufacturers or workers or vulnerable groups or underrepresented groups. So through this approach, we will take into account all different aspects, and we will take into account their needs and their specific requirements. Additionally, we should investigate the societal values, norms, and frictions, because the decisions that people make are affected by several factors. They can be affected by their previous experiences, by the social background, the wider social perspective that they may introduce in their in the way of thinking. So we should capture the whole picture so that in the end we will build trust around the new technologies and the new materials. And as we said before, and it is important to be mentioned once again, this engagement of all stakeholders and the incorporation of social perspective should be made as early as possible from the beginning, from the designing phase and the developmental phases of new products or new materials, because this is a way to improve social trust. And this is exactly where social science actually shines, because they help us to identify the trade-offs and identify all possible tensions between the technical and societal goals of a new product. We can assess different factors, such as, for example, the usability against the performance, or the innovation against the public trust, or the cost against the sustainability. And to achieve this goal, we have created a three-phase strategy that we are following within BioSapphire, and that can be also adapted across different projects to address the needs of several research processes. We are starting by map all relevant stakeholders in each sector. And with this, I mean that we should identify who are the key actors, and then we will try to prioritize among them by defining who is influenced by the innovation and to what degree, and who is affected by who affects the innovation. So in this way, we can prioritize and define who are the key actors. And then in the second phase, we are actually talk with these key stakeholders. We are creating focus group, and we are implementing interviews with the stakeholders to collect qualitative data on their concerns and their expectation and how they perceive risks and benefits. In this step, we're using several social science tools, such as discursive dialogue, to assess as many information as possible from the stakeholders and then provide feedback to the material designer. And the third phase includes the organization of participatory workshop, where we are bringing all stakeholders together, and we're trying to co-identify along with them their trade-offs and the practical tensions between the competitive goals of a product. As I said before, we can assess cost, final cost of a material against sustainability, or safety against usability. And of course, in the end, all this information will be translated into actionable design feedback and will be incorporated on the Safe and Sustainable by Design framework in order to inform all the decision-making processes. And I will try to explain a little bit more, but really brief, how the trade-offs can be identified by taking example of the pilot case of BioSapphire project. There we have 4 different pilot cases, and we have initially identified the key stakeholder in these industrial sectors. And here in these 2 following slides, you can see some trade-offs that we have initially identified. Of course, trade-offs can be further expanded. We can enrich these trade-offs, and we can have more information and more factors that we would like to assess and define the balance against these specific functions that we would like to incorporate in our decision-making. For example, in the railway sector, you can see that the main stakeholders identified includes the manufacturers and the operators. And one of the trade-offs that we have initially identified is, for example, the cost of retrofitting against the upgrade to safer materials, or the worker safety against automation of maintenance protocols. In a similar way, we have also identified the stakeholders in the naval sector, and we have also defined some trade-offs in this also in this use case. For example, here we have environmental sustainability against the challenges related with the corrosion of the material, corrosion resistance and durability of the materials that are used in marine coatings. Following, we have 2 more pilot cases. This can be more easily understood by everybody because in these 2 pilot cases, we have products that can be purchased by everyone. We have home appliance and furniture, actually wood furniture. And you can see that in these 2 pilot cases, we can have several trade-offs related to the final cost of the materials and how they can be compared with the functionalities that these materials have, in our case, dealing with fire safety and fire standards, or the aesthetic part of the final products against the compliance with safety standards that are currently existing related to the fire safety. Before going a little bit further and asking you also to participate in a small exercise and also provide your feedback and your perspective in the trade-offs related to the home appliances, I would like to also mention another important issue that is quite often overlooked. We know that we already said that stakeholders bring their own perspectives, but they also bring their own biases. And biases actually help to shape decision. They are not necessarily negative, but they affect how people think, they affect how people perceive things, and they affect how people make complex decisions. So they should be taken into consideration in order to have the whole idea and outline specifically how all stakeholders perceive things and how they will affect their decision-making process. And in this slide, you can see various group of stakeholders and how they prioritize the things really different. For example, we have the regulators that they will mainly focus on public safety, on the compliance with current standards, on any risk that may arise by introducing new type of materials in a production line. And another different approach, consumers and the users, they will focus on the price, they will focus on the aesthetic part of the final product, they will focus on the functionalities that they are introduced in this new type of products, while the industrial actors, they will focus on the effectiveness and the scalability of the production line, the cost that they will have to invest in order to have this production line, and of course several other factors, such as, for example, the safety of the workers during production, this new type of materials. So now, I would like to ask to take into consideration your own perspective and of course your own biases, and please scan this QR code with your mobile devices and provide us your input on what actually guides your choice when you're trying to purchase a new home appliance, what will actually influence your decision. You will see that upon scanning this QR code, you will have 5 different criteria. I said I don't have a lot of time, so I will go a little bit quicker. You will see that you have 5 criteria: price, environmental concern, ethical production, design, and quality. And you will ask to rank these 5 criteria from 1 to 5. Please note that the one that is most important for you is the one that is ranked with 5. So 5 is the most important. It's not working? Ioanna? Not working, the QR code. It should be open. It is open. It is open. It's not working. It's open. It's not open.
It's open.
It is open. Yeah. Can you refresh once again? No. No. That is not working.
We cannot see the activities actually.
Now it's
The pulse.
I believe you. I believe you. Δεν δουλεύει. We don't have time to wait for this to work. I don't know. It's open. It's open. I don't know why it's not working.
And it says waiting for votes.
Okay. Hmm? Yeah, it is activated.
Waiting for votes.
It's activated and waiting for votes.
Maybe we need a coffee, then we can try to. No, I don't know, because they are pressed me that we should go to have a coffee break, because otherwise they will not give us.
Okay.
And then maybe we can come back and try to.
Okay. I will continue. I will finish the presentation.
Yeah, sorry to
we can
interrupt you,
come
but-
back. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that the majority of you will choose price as the most important priority, because this is actually what most of the consumers will try to find the optimum balance between price and quality. But it is becoming a trend, and more people take into consideration also sustainability and safety aspects when trying to purchase new products. But okay, I will continue. really quick. In this slide, you can see the main questions that should be taken into consideration when we were trying to incorporate within the Safe and Sustainable by Design framework also social science insight. We should try to define who benefits and who loses from this new product or material, and if there are actors that benefit more or lose more. We should try to assess if the environmental gains offset by social burdens, for example, if we have higher costs in the end or reduced affordability, accessibility. We should set a specific question related to the materials. Could the new substances introduced in its project or in its research process introduce different handling challenges? So we should also incorporate new training session, or are the workers, for example, exposed differently? So we should take additional protective measures into account. And last, but of course not least, is the innovation perceived as fair, transparent, and legitimate? Meaning that are all trade-offs clearly understood by all stakeholders and clearly communicated to everyone? And moving on, to achieve this integration and have the social insight be taken into incorporation within the SSbD framework, we are also trying to create capacity building programs, because the goal is to equip all partners, not just social scientists, but also scientists, material researchers, business development teams, industrial partners, to be equipped with knowledge, tools, and of course the mindset to work with people in mind from the early beginning. The goal of having a capacity building program is to identify all red flags as early as possible and before they become actual risk, to create flexible tools to assess the social readiness, and to assess how ready a solution can be to be really adopted by real-world settings, and adapt these tools to the various projects. And of course, to support ethical and inclusive decision-making by equipping all teams to weigh the criteria between the trade-offs and not just focusing on cost and performance. To achieve this, we need to establish collaboration across discipline. We need to establish close collaboration among social scientists and technical partners in order to ensure that all data are taken into account when reaching the decision, and design materials that will be not with people, but for design along with them and design for them, so that in the end we will incorporate social science in the SSbD framework and the life cycle assessment, and also have social life cycle assessment within projects. So my colleague Sarah will focus on this topic afterwards. So in the end, that we will have not just SSbD, but another S in the SSbD. We will incorporate social perspectives. And to close the presentation today, let's just mention that social impact is not just a soft add-on. It is a strategic advantage, and it is the way to ensure that in the end we will not just create improved materials and better materials, but we will follow a safety, sustainable, and socially accepted way of introducing innovative solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So with this, we can have a social coffee break right now.
Social coffee break now?
Yeah, and then we will continue, because otherwise they will cut our coffee break. This time the Slido. The technician. Okay. So here on the screen you have the QR codes that now should work. So we can try to use it, access.
Okay, hello once again. I have to be here, sorry. Hello once again. As we said before, it must be working now. We would like to ask you to scan this QR code and rank these 5 criteria that you will see in your screens based on what is most important for you and what is the least important, by ranking with 5 the one that is the most important criteria, and with 1 the one that is the least important. So it's not the opposite direction, so keep this in mind. And I will give you 2 to 3 minutes just to provide your votes, and then I will give floor to Sarah to continue. Is it working now? Yeah. I see that everybody's doing something, so.
But from here, the graph represents all the participants?
Yes.
So the results is, okay.
Okay. No, we cannot transfer the... You cannot sing the... Πρέπει να κάνεις, you have to sign in with your account in Slido. I don't know if it's possible.
But everyone sees the results on his phone.
Yeah. We can see.
You can, as you are voting, you can see the results in your screen, so you will see how the different criteria are valued. And since I don't want to, okay, there's still several partners scanning.
No,
The quality is the most important.
no. In this case, it's the opposite.
Quality.
But when you select the five,
Same.
Yes.
Okay.
But when you vote, 5 is most
Five is the
important.
most important.
And
Ah.
when you
but
see
now
the
is the
results,
opposite.
So
The results.
Yeah, the results are the
Yes.
opposite,
Okay.
because they just give the percentage of...
Ah, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Είδες πως είπα το quality θα είναι πρώτο.
Of course, it will be the quality first.
Όχι,
And then the
μόλις
price.
ήταν το price.
You already know.
No, I said
I'm
it
sure
should be
about, I
quality.
was sure about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was sure about quality, but not for price. Because for me, it's quality.
I select
Okay,
environmental.
so
Okay. Okay, I will close the voting process right now because I think that all of you have already provided your votes. And you can see the results in your mobiles, and I can also see them here, but we cannot share the screen right now. The first one, it seems to be the quality for everybody, and then the price. And I'm happy to see... Okay, of course, it was expected that the environmental concerns and the ethical production are the least one, and they're least important because, as a matter of fact, we all know that ethical production and sustainable production are currently gaining their way into the criteria that affect people's choices. So we are expected in the upcoming years, more and more, we will take into account sustainability and safety when we're trying to purchase new products. But up to now, we have only quality and price. But thank you for voting, and this information will be taken into account when analyzing the results. And hopefully, in an upcoming event that we will present again how we are incorporating social science in the SSbD framework, maybe we will have the environmental and ethical production in a higher position. So thank you once again, and then I will give floor to Sarah to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I'm very great to present Sarah that will talk about social LCA that is very connected to the previous presentation about social approaches.
Hello. So we just listened how it's important to include the social dimension in the SSbD framework. There is a step that is dedicated to social and economic consideration. It's optional for now. And now we are going to dive into the methodologies that is used for the social dimension in the SSbD framework and more in general to assess the social sustainability dimension. Premise, like we listened that social impacts are not only measurable indicators, but also perception, but we're not able to capture that with this methodology. So for now, like, bear with me, but we're gonna talk about social impacts that we can measure somehow with some indicators. And that's another debate, like how much more inputs from the social sciences we need in social LCA. Just a quick question, is there someone working with social LCA just to recognize ourselves and maybe have coffee or eat together tomorrow and discuss a bit about here, because it's important to share. And today I'm going to present you briefly the methodology of social LCA, the databases that are used, what can you do to improve the assessment, and an example from case studies we work with.
So the social LCA, I reported here the definition that has been provided by the newly released ISO standard that says that social life cycle assessment is a technique for assessing social and socio-economic aspects, both positive and negative, that is different from environmental LCA of products in a life cycle perspective. And so the methodology also follows the steps of an environmental LCA. So we have a goal scope definition, social life cycle inventory, social life cycle impact assessment, and the interpretation. And again, like we learned this morning, it's an iterative process, so you can always go back and like fix the assumption or like include more scenarios or data while they are available during the process. There are different uses of social LCA. I want also to point out what has been said before, like the social impacts awareness affects social acceptance, and that's a point that I didn't include, but I wanted to stress. And it's also why in safe and sustainable by design, like we're trying to integrate that more and more, because we are proposing new things that need to be incorporated in societies. But going back to social LCA, there are different outcomes that you can have from a study that goes from the social hotspot identification, so meaning understanding which activity or material has the supply chain that is associated with more social risks. The social footprint outcome, meaning the overall impacts of a system that it's related to a functional unit and is expressed in terms of subcategories and categories that we're going to see later. Or social performance, meaning an overview of how a company or a product behaves in terms of social aspects. The second step, as I was mentioning, the social life cycle inventory, and again we have distinction between primary data and secondary data, and we have much less available data on this, but there are different ways again to collect them. We need to collect different kind of data based on which kind of assessment we're doing, but in general we need the inventories, so all the flows included in the system in an LCA fashion, because we need to model again our system, but also include the costs of each process and the location in which it happens or a material is produced, and then there can be some assessment in which we have a specific indicator and collect data on that. And we can collect data in different ways, as in environmental life cycle assessment. So we can collect primary data with interviews, surveys, and audits, or collect secondary data from literature, database, or different reports or statistical data. And it's considered one, also in life cycle assessment, but especially in social, a very critical phase, because of course, I think you can imagine like it's very difficult to get to all the stakeholders involved in a supply chain and ask direct questions. So sometimes you have only one of the stakeholders or few of them to talk with, and so you have to make assumption on the rest or like complement with secondary data. The database that are more used are the social hotspot database and the PSILCA, it's product social impact life cycle assessment. And both works at the country levels, meaning that you have to know the country from which your process or materials is from and the sector to which it pertains, and then they have different kind of indicators filled and that feed some subcategories based on the location to which your process pertains. And there are data from many different sources. Usually they are open sources, so it depends also on the availability of data at the country level, and this affects also like the results that you get, because some countries have lower availability of data, and so that can then corresponds to higher potential risks because there were not data available. I'm more familiar with the social hotspot database, so I'm going to talk about it in the next slides. And the important point on that is that the way that they allocate this social risk is through an activity variable that is a way of measuring how much the contribution of a process is to the final output. And this means like the most common, it's easier to understand with an example, is the worker hours. So how many worker hours are needed to complete the activities that is your process. I know that Silka does not do it in the update. It was overcome this point, but we have people from Green Delta, so go to him. And concerning then the life cycle impact assessment, one of the important points to stress is that as a stakeholder focus, as I was mentioning, so it's calculating impacts on different social groups. And this is done through our inventory data that are collected to feed some subcategory indicators and then aggregated in subcategories that are related to specific stakeholder groups. And as you see, there are 6 stakeholder groups in the social hotspot database. Now 5 of them are included. But yes, if you do an analysis in which you don't rely on the social hotspot database, you can select which are the most relevant for you, or use them all, or there are studies that focus on only one, so it's quite flexible, the selection. And there are 2 ways of performing a social life cycle impact assessment. The first type is to use a reference scale. So for each indicator, you have to define like what is the compliant level, and then assign points if you are above it or below, and you can decide how the reference scale look like, adopt some others. So usually you're gonna see like 5 points, but there are also easier one with 3, and it's really, again, flexible. It's possible to use it in the way that is gonna fit best your case studies. And then there is the impact pathway that is more similar to environmental life cycle assessment, because it tries to link inventory data with first effect and then consequences in the social value chain. And now I wanted to explain a bit how we use this in a safe and sustainable by design context, so how to make this useful for companies and for assessment. And I reported here an example of flowchart just to stress again the fact that you need to model anyway your system, and it's in safe and sustainable by design. Usually, like the sustainability dimension is collective work from different partners. So you're gonna have this kind of data, and you need LCA data and cost and locations again. And we collect all this, and then we select all the processes in the database, and I'm going to show a bit tomorrow how this database looks like. And we obtain from that the social hotspots of our innovation. So we can see which materials in which location are the ones associated with the higher potential social risks. And from that we can do some further steps to refine a bit the assessment. But I'm going to come back on that in a second. And we obtain results, and we have subcategory levels. So all the subcategories that I was explaining are fed by the indicators, but we can also aggregate, like in LCA, even if it's not quite the same. And in this case, like different colors correspond to different processes. We, in this case, since we were doing a social hotspot analysis, we were more interested in seeing the difference between different raw materials and not having results by life cycle stages to understand which were the most problematic. And the way in which subcategories are calculated in the social hotspot database that is provided with also a calculation methodology is through the social hotspot index that from the input you give, that is the cost of your material and the location, it calculates the medium risk hour needed to produce that amount by multiplying the worker hours that are associated to that cost and a risk level that is assigned by in the database through all the sources that I mentioned before. And you can also obtain results more aggregated. In this case, it's a comparison between innovative products at different benchmarks. And the aggregation happens, some subcategories are aggregated into a broader issue. So, for instance, we have labor rights, and we have forced labor as subcategories, accessing working time, poverty, and so on. And I was mentioning that after this social hotspot assessment, what we try to do is to refine a bit the results and trying to understand if the hotspots correspond to reality and what we can do more to understand more about it. And you can do either a desk research, so try to understand if some of the companies have available sustainability report or has been reported by local NGOs, or in literature someone already studied that supply chain in that specific geographic area, or engage with the company. In SSbD, usually we have this direct communication with companies, so it's possible to try and ask their collaboration. As I was mentioning in the beginning, it's possible that you're going to have only them as an interlocutor, but sometimes it's possible maybe to reach out also to the suppliers. It's, it's not very likely maybe they're going to reply. It's very different, but this also helps to raise awareness in the production companies that the choice they make with their suppliers are kind of critical and crucial for the final sustainability performance of their innovations. And we tried to do that with a company that was available to do this exercise. And so we created a very brief survey to try, from the hotspot we had identified, to try to see if we could get some information on that. And so we asked of sustainability reports and fact if their workers were part of trade union, if there were limitations to strike. And yeah, we didn't get answers, but we're hopeful that while social sustainability is gonna get more and more momentum, this, like Despina said, in the future, we're gonna have different answer and more engagement from everybody. Thank you. That is all.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for a nice presentation. So I would like to thank all the speakers here. And do you have any question about social science approaches? Or okay, do you need a mic, maybe?
Thank you. Thank you for the very nice presentations, adding value to these days of work together. First question, is it possible, according to you, to really profile the stakeholders or stakeholder groups? I mean, something of that kind we did already with the Slido, of course, it's clear, but quantitatively profiling, so not just having a ranking of some options, but to vote on which percentage each option represents from the stakeholder, like 80%, 90%, 100%, if it is the only one, etc., with a continuous, say, rating. Second, the drivers for social LCA, I mean the top-down, is normally working with drivers which are cost of materials, products, etc. What do you think? I mean, is there any bias? Is there any time dependence? May we compare social life cycle studies today with the ones that we will perform tomorrow with the same materials, but which can change price, like energy, for instance?
So prices are provided in USD dollars of 2011, so you have to do the equivalence. But also I'm not confident that prices are a good proxy, because of course, if a price is higher, it's what we're discussing, it doesn't mean that there is more social risk. Maybe it means that there is more fairness in the company. So I don't know. I'm curious to explore a bit more Silka. I've been told that it's a bit trying to overcome some of these issues, but I don't think costs are the right way. Just one of the issues also of trying to develop this methodology with not enough inputs from the social sciences is also that we try to think the same way as life cycle assessment, and really social impacts are not only measurable things that we can use proxies to verify. So I agree, I'm not satisfied with the methodology. And first question, maybe you want.
About the stakeholders?
Okay. We are trying to categorize stakeholders primarily maybe based on their influence and their how they affect the innovation. But indeed, if we are trying to do this process from an early beginning, we will have enough data and enough time to also have this profiling process. It's not something that it is typically done up to now, and that's why we are trying to introduce this new methodology in the research project. So yes, the goal is to start profiling the group of stakeholders before, because indeed it can be really change the perspectives and the biases. Currently, the only methodology that is followed is just mapping them and using a typical 4 criteria prioritization based on the most important and the least influenced. But this is not a really good way to proceed, because actually we can have many variations. So there's not a standardized approach to follow, and this is something that we are exploring and we will try to put in our processes. I totally agree with you that it's not the proper way to prioritize among the stakeholders, but to be honest, there's not a specific way to do it right now. But we will try to do this.
Also, apart from the quantitative data that you want to see, I think that especially material production, there are so many quantitative data, and regardless of the fact that at the moment there is not a specific way to integrate social sciences, especially in European funded programs, I am pretty sure that the first way to go in order to actually assess that is going to be qualitative and not quantitative. So I understand what you mean, that you want to see the 80% of stakeholders wants to do this, but I am really pretty sure that this is not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to be qualitative first through either focus groups, workshops between partners, and especially interviews and surveys. Afterwards, of course, we're going to put some thought into making all of that data, and in order to analyze that with probably R or other programs. But what really matters to us right now is what people have to say actively on that, not so much the data. But I understand that you're coming from a practical background, so it's okay. Exactly, yeah.
So we can have the last question maybe, and then we should move to the third data session.
Okay, so thank you so much for your presentations. I also work in this, and I'm very excited to have a lot of discussion on this topic, and I'm very passionate. I was wondering, what thoughts do you have about the similarities between SLCA and the approach that you're using, for example, in BioSapphire, with more involvement of stakeholders to see public acceptance? You have some words on that. And then another question is, what are your thoughts on the challenges of the incorporation of any of these two approaches into the current SSbD framework? Yes, thank you.
This is a long way to be followed, and we have a lot of things to do before integrating this social aspect in SSbD. This is the goal. This is the goal. It was a process that it started by defining safety consideration, and this was incorporated in the safety by design framework that was initially put on our ways, and then we focused on sustainability, and then now we have the SSbD framework, and I think that eventually we will also incorporate social, but it will take time, and it's something that is quite often started, and I think that the majority of projects right now, research projects, I mean, they're focusing on integrating social science, and they're focusing also on integrating stakeholders. So I think that in the near future, we will also have social perspective incorporated in this impact assessment methodology that we are following. But, okay, it needs to be built upon.
Yeah, and another challenge maybe like from the pool that we did before, like ethical concerns are the very last point. So maybe, yes, that's a point.
Why did all of you put ethical concerns at the end? Are you guys into child labor? No, it's okay. I would prefer quality too. But ethical concerns at the end was a little bit worrying, I have to say. Probably that's why European Union had decided to integrate social sciences into European funded programs. So.
Okay, so.
That was not funny.
The last question, and then.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you for your very nice presentation. Some of you mentioned the normalization also by a functional unit in social LCA. But when I see the guidelines, for example, or the methodologies, they clearly state that it's very difficult to define a functional unit as we do with physical units in normal environmental LCA. So how is this distribution allocation, like some of you mentioned, the flow division to attribute to the functional unit? Because you have a broad category, for example, child labor. How do you assign this child labor to 1 kilogram, for example, of the chemical produced? Is this normalization really happening, or it's maintained separately where you have a functional unit for environmental social LCA and you have different categories and the different picture that it's made for social LCA?
So I know that is said to be a critical point, but then it's also said, like, I read many studies in which they were saying that it's necessary to do that, and what we were trying to do also was to try to find a way to ease the integration then with LCA results and LCC results to have a common functional unit. And the things like it's that you have cost of the amount of product that you need for that functional unit, and so that's how the scale
translates to another. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much again to all of you and to the speakers.